we engage properly and human resource. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we have our legal team, I think director. So I think in the interest of time, honorable members, allow us to present to you this afternoon on the topics that we had been requested to look at, and to also have an opportunity to have interactive dialogue with yourselves on matters related to our mandate. And our mandate is not only on elections. I'm sure maybe that's where the interest of most of the members is, especially given that 2027 is approaching very fast. Our mandate includes, of course, conducting and supervising elections and referenda. And last but not least, of course, undertaking boundary delimitation. So it gives me, honorable members, great pleasure to stand before you today and to share with you our level of preparedness in the execution of our mandate. Cognizant of the importance of this call and the strategic position that Parliament occupies in our society and in facilitating our core mandates. We appreciate the continued engagement and support with the National Assembly in advancing Kenya's democratic governance. We recognize the Parliament's central role, not only in appropriation of resources for our mandate, but also in oversighting our work as Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. In that regard, we are therefore grateful that we have a strategic partner in safeguarding our electoral integrity, political stability, and public confidence in our democratic governance and institutions. We believe that our engagement today will result in better understanding of the Commission's work and strengthen the collaboration between the Commission, Parliament, and indeed other institutions of governance in the Republic of Kenya. Honorable members, I was invited to make a presentation on behalf of my colleagues on the key 3 areas, all related to our preparations for the 2027 general election. The 3 areas include the legislative and regulatory requirements necessary for the conduct of the next general election, B, the budgetary and financial support that the Commission requires in order to undertake those elections and other functions, stakeholder support, number C, and of course, we may need to give you also updates on the election operations and the boundary delimitation exercise. In terms of our legislative and regulatory requirements, we recognize that elections are central to democracy and protecting citizens' rights to vote, of course under Article 38, or to contest for office under the same article. The credibility of elections therefore depend on there being free and fair elections. And we are saying therefore that when elections don't work, when we have flawed elections, then nothing will work in the Republic. Flawed elections may lead to instability and of course violence, as we've witnessed before in the history of the Republic. IEBC, as you all recognize and know already, is mandated to oversee the elections and referendum, and we have an elaborate legal framework that defines and delimits our work in that regard. And therefore, Parliament, being the legislature that makes laws that guide our work, your role therefore becomes very, very critical to us. In the past, before we joined the Commission, we've had attempts at introducing a series of reforms to just strengthen and to improve the legal framework that governs our work. And I'm sure in this regard, Parliament has had interactions with our predecessors, that is the previous Commission that conducted the 2022 general elections, and subsequently, even after the departure of those commissioners from office, you have had interactions with our secretariat on various issues that required your attention in terms of the legal reforms around the election group, to draft bills and to propose those regulatory changes, and to prepare the submissions to Parliament. Around the same time, the Commission also was invited to make presentations to NADCO, that is the National Dialogue Committee, and indeed the Secretariat submitted those draft bills and the regulations that required the attention of NADCO and Parliament. Now, we have some of the proposals that we are currently finalizing on. I'll just highlight some of them in terms of the changes that we want to request Parliament to relook at in order to see if they can be incorporated in the new electoral laws. We will need, of course, to relook at the Elections Act with a view to amending it. Elections Act is the primary legislation besides the Constitution. The Elections Act is the primary legislation that governs the manner in which we conduct elections in Kenya. And having gone through the Elections Act in the light of the experiences of the previous elections, we have highlighted some of the changes, some of the proposals that we invite Parliament to have a look at. We need Parliament to look at the definitions of nominations and registration of candidates for elections. There is some ambiguity in the manner in which we have defined nomination and registration of the candidates. We find that, for example, when we were undertaking the by-elections that concluded in November last year, the role of nominating candidates remains with political parties. And then that leaves the Commission with the role of registering those candidates that have been duly nominated and certified by their respective political parties. And of course, registration of candidates also extends to those candidates that are running as independent candidates. So we need to delineate that role of nomination vis-a-vis registration. We are also invited to look at the issue of forensic imaging in order to clarify the manner in which election technology is amenable to scrutiny. We are also concerned about the timelines, to review the timelines for inspection of the register of voters, verification of biometric data, and of course the nomination of candidates by political parties, and the candidate registration process. There's a lot sometimes in terms of the timelines that have been specified in the Elections Act, and then we require to sequence so that then we know at what point do we stop registration, at what point do we audit the register, at what point do we publish the register, and at what point do we complete registration of candidates as a commission, so that then we have ample time to prepare for the next phase, or which is to prepare the ballot papers. We have also highlighted in the Elections Act the need to relook at the implementation of the 2/3 gender rule. I think that's a matter that Parliament insists of. Then there's also the issue of independent candidates, especially on the use of symbols. Sometimes we find independent candidates across the country with using the same symbols that we have already registered, and therefore we need to provide a mechanism where these symbols can be localized, so that then they have as many available to them. The issue of the results path and declaration of results pursuant to the decisions of the Supreme Court in the previous presidential petitions also needs to be looked at in terms of amendments, entrenching those amendments in the Elections Act. And of course, I've talked about scrutiny of technology. There are also sometimes these provisions on the recall of members of parliament. The first of the things that we were confronted with when we took over office in July last year was this issue of recall. And I'm sure you must have seen it in the media. It was a bit, there was a lot of agitation by some sections of citizens. So we need clarity on that in terms of the regulations. Dispute resolution, again, we have made some proposals to streamline the manner in which we resolve pre-election disputes. The issue of election petitions also will need your attention. And in terms of the IEBC Act, there are certain spent provisions that will require to be removed. Then the issue of quorum of the commission. We are aware, and we've seen it in the law, that the quorum of the commission was raised from 3 to 5, and we are 7 commissioners, so that the quorum, the threshold for the quorum, I think we may have to discuss that issue as well, because previously there were 9 commissioners, but now we have 7. So we have to look at how that enhances or hinders our work. And then, of course, the issues of decision making within the commission, if that can also be looked into. In terms of the Election Offences Act, we need to look at the provisions relating to the mandate of the commission to investigate, prosecute, and punish those offenses, especially arising from the implementation of the Electoral Code of Conduct, and vis-a-vis the role of the ODPP. So some of the weaknesses we have is that even within the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, even when some of our election officers commit some of these offenses, their prosecution sometimes, because it's not within us, our mandate is left to ODPP, and there's need for us to look at that, whether it's suitable to leave it as such or to bring it back to the commission, so that we can also have some teeth to bite to discourage some of these electoral malpractices and offenses. The County Governments Act, there is some contradiction, especially in section 26 of the County Governments Act. We have in that act a specification of 1,450 wards. And yet, Article 89 gives the Commission the mandate and the powers to review the number of wards, their names, and of course their boundaries. So we feel you need to look at that and to align it with the Constitution. Very quickly, election campaign financing. This is an issue that is, again, within public domain. that Parliament needs to relook at that legislation to see if we can finalize on the campaign financing regulations in time for the Commission to implement. The referendum is also another issue that Kenyans are concerned about, and in some cases they have approached the Commission with petitions and signatures requesting that some of these constitutional amendments be commenced, but without the with the absence of a statutory instrument to enable us undertake that mandate, which is a constitutional mandate, our hands are tied, and therefore we need to relook at the referendum bill. And then, of course, lastly, there are a number of other subsidiary legislations in terms of regulations touching on elections, party primaries, on technology, voter education, voter registration, and campaign financing that we need to discuss with you once we submit those proposals to see how best we can fast track their enactment. The Commission therefore stresses that in line with international best practices, laws should be enacted at least 1 year before a general election, as late enactments of legislations hamper the effective implementation of our elections mandate. So we are therefore urging Parliament to quickly and to find time, to dedicate time to look at the proposals we'll be submitting, and hopefully in the course of this year, as late as August, if not earlier, to see if you can give us an improved legislative framework for us to internalize and to implement on time. And so very quickly, some of the challenges that in terms of legal issues we are dealing with in the Commission. We have the issue of conflicting timelines. I think I've addressed that issue. Then we also inherited outstanding legal fees. And as you may be aware, during and after every election, there is always a flurry of litigation and legal challenges that we are faced with as the Commission. And that has necessitated the Commission to get support from external legal counsel. And we owe them some money going into 2027 general election. And this situation, very unique situation, has also been brought about by the limited capacity, internal capacity. Currently, we are operating with only 4 lawyers, in-house lawyers in IEBC. And during the election season, sometimes we have to go through as many as over 100 election-related disputes. And we are not only dealing with the main elections, but also disputes arising from the party primaries during the registration of candidates. And of course, those cases relating to enforcement of the elections code of conduct. So I must state clearly that internally, we cannot as a Commission cope with those litigation cases, besides, of course, other internal legal advisories that we need. Of course, in the past, we've also have not had resources that are adequate and they are specifically allocated to the Commission to undertake legal reforms. And yet, our elections, based on the electoral cycles, once we are done with the elections, we don't assume that life stops there. There's still a lot that the Commission must begin to do. We must do post-election evaluation, And based on that, we need to embark on legal reforms and other processes that will lead towards the next electoral cycle. Honorable members, the Commission therefore respectfully appeals to you to support us in relation to improving on the legislative matters that touch on the elections. In terms of budgetary and financial support required by the Commission, I think here briefly I must say, we've engaged in all the financial processes. We are currently engaged in the MTEF process. We have had meetings also with yourselves, the leadership of the Assembly, when we took over office, and raised some of the issues of concern around our budgets. First for the by-elections, and then for the general elections. We have engaged with the National Treasury, and we are saying, let us look at elections as an investment that is necessary for the economic, political, social progress of this republic. And that elections must be funded adequately for the Commission to do a good job, for the Commission to deliver a peaceful, credible, free, and fair elections at all levels, whether it's by-elections or the general election that is coming up. And if we do not fund elections adequately, then we are likely to suffer in terms of the technical and operational preparedness. And in areas such as, of course, voter registration, expanding voter registration, because we are projecting additional 6 million voters based on the registration numbers. And therefore, with this population growth, definitely we need resources for us to register the new voters in town. We also require resources in order to expand and maintain and expand our electoral infrastructure, technology, and the systems that we will require for the upcoming general elections. Of course, in terms of technology, we are currently under the committee led by Professor Francis Aduol, the ICT committee. We are discussing and we are looking at what are some of these emerging technologies, what are some of these cutting-edge technologies that we can tap into in order to improve on our electoral processes. So we'll require funding for that. Election security. This is also another big item that will require funding, and based on the needs to secure the voters, our staff, and election materials. And of course, drawing on best practices elsewhere, we will require adequate funding for us to do a good job and to ensure that our elections are among the best globally. So, honorable members of Parliament, in 2026, we requested for funding. We were allocated 4.7 billion. There's a table there which gives the summary. And for this year, 2026, 2027, we have a funding shortfall of 14. And for 2027, 2028, a funding shortfall of 8.6 billion. And overall, we have a funding gap of 22.9 billion requests. And of course, those needs, again, touch on our voter education and civic awareness, legal and regulatory reforms, stakeholder engagement and dispute prevention, strategic communication and countering misinformation, election security preparedness, staff training, welfare and logistics, and of course procurement of materials, election materials, and settlement of our legal bills. So, Honorable Member, we request your indulgence, we request you for your support to help us deliver peaceful, free, fair, and credible elections through adequate, timely funding. In terms of stakeholder support, I'll move very quickly in the interest of time. We value, of course, the participation and consultation with stakeholders. We value the feedback of stakeholders, including you as members of parliament who are primary stakeholders, because this feedback will help us to improve on transparency, address public concerns on key processes such as the referendum, the general election, boundary delimitation, voter registration, results management, technology, and all those critical processes. And therefore, it is in that regard that we, as this new commission, have prioritized stakeholder engagement. If you recall, when we took over office, hardly a month passed, we requested to meet the leadership of the National Assembly, and the Right Honorable Speaker here granted us that audience. We also have interacted with a number of committees, JLAC, the committee on the implementation of the Constitution, and we have spoken as much about the need for us to collaborate in order for us to deliver for Kenyans the best elections in 2027. So, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, we have already, besides meeting with Parliament, we have also met with the judiciary, the Honorable Chief Justice, with the Committee on the JCE, the Judiciary Committee on Elections, to also discuss our levels of preparedness and the legal reforms that require to be put in place in time ahead of the general election. We have also discussed issues of dispute resolution during this electoral cycle. We've also met with the National Treasury, I've mentioned that already, and we have also expanded our engagements to meeting with international development partners. And we have had discussions with the development partners under a framework of the governance working group on elections. And that engagement is continuing, and we hope it will bear fruit. We also had engagements with the United Nations on electoral assistance. And so far, there was a mission that came to Kenya, met with various stakeholders, and I believe that mission also met with Parliament, met with civil society, media, and the executive. And as a result of that mission, we received approval late in December from the United Nations Electoral Assistance Program that they have approved the mission findings and recommendations, and that the United Nations will work with us. The United Nations will also support us to the best extent possible in terms of looking for resources to support certain aspects of elections. We've not, honorable members, we've not left out members of the civil society. As you know, Kenya has a very vibrant civil society, and they play a very critical role in an election. That role includes, of course, undertaking voter education and civic engagement. And it is within that context that we've had a number of meetings with the civil society, and we've briefed one another on what role each one of us will play in order to deliver peaceful, credible, free, and fair general elections in 2027. As you may be aware of the risks that we face as technology and new media is evolving, we have also engaged with the media, not only the traditional media as you know it, but we have also engaged with the digital media platforms. I think, Mheshimiwa, you know the bloggers, eh? They are there, they are present. Most of them, we realize, are some of our young people, young members of society. And we've tried to bring them on board. And God willing and resources permitting, we will have this group of young people who are active in social media and in digital spaces to work with us to ensure that we mobilize the country in the right direction. We mobilize the country towards proper registration of those out of school youth and the special interest groups to register and to be active participants in the coming general election. So there are a number of all these stakeholders. I cannot exhaust all of them, but deliberately we are making an effort to reach out to them. And actually next week, we will be meeting with the religious groups, one by one or as groups. And we will also be prioritizing meeting with the political parties under the umbrella framework of the Political Parties Liaison Committee. So in regard to meeting political parties, we are working with ORPP, and I'm glad the Registrar of Political Parties was here and spoke earlier, and of course the PPLC. So as you understand, we are a tripartite group established under the law, and we are working together to ensure that we have a robust engagement with the political parties through that platform. So as I conclude, honorable members, I wish to just highlight to you a few things on electoral operations, where we are as of now. Registration of voters, we've already rolled out the registration of voters exercise that is based at the constituency levels. We discovered that that is not sufficient, and we've received a number of complaints from wananchi and from some of you members of parliament. The essence of that was for us to jumpstart that process while planning for the mass voter registration exercise. So we started the continuous voter, the constituency-based one, on 29 September last year, and we have sequenced the ward-based registration of voters process to begin on the 29th March 2026, just immediately after that month, holy month of Ramadan. And this, of course, sequencing is informed by a number of factors, including, of course, the availability of funding for the mass voter registration exercise. We have also looked at weather, we have also looked at other events that may disrupt the mass voter. So in mass voter registration, we will have over 27,000 registration centers. And so we will have our registration of officers based in the various wards, so that then we reduce that distance between the citizens and our registration centers. We are also deploying registration officers across the 57 counties, Huduma centers across the country. So if you have Huduma center in your constituency or in your various regions, we will have registration clerks there. So that begins on 29th March this year. So by-elections, we are having the by-elections in Isiolo and other areas, and we are continuing to learn from our experiences in conducting by-elections in order to perfect the systems and operational processes. Honorable members, I think I will do injustice if I don't mention the issue of diaspora. We have had engagements with our Kenyans in diaspora, being such an influential constituency, and we have agreed that, again, in accordance with the Constitution, that decrees us to progressively realize the rights of the Kenyans in diaspora. We will expand registration and their participation in our electoral processes. So that is an ongoing engagement, and we have an active diaspora group. Boundary delimitations. This is a matter that I think all Kenyans have been waiting for, especially on our decision on what next, in the light of the advisory opinion from the Supreme Court, and of course noting that there have been timelines that have constitutional timelines that have lapsed. We were to have concluded that process by March 6th, 2024, but that was not to be. And of course, there are a number of challenges that caused all that, and we have addressed ourselves to that. So this morning, before we came here, we addressed the nation on that issue. So we've released a press statement on our decision on how we are proceeding. So maybe for you to note, we have made a decision to proceed with delimitation, but in a phased approach. Because boundary delimitation is a very complex issue. It is an issue that will require us to prepare adequately in terms of the kind of software we need, the training, and stakeholder engagement and interagency coordination. And all these things, we cannot squeeze them within the time frame that we have towards the 2027 general election. So we're saying, yes, we are alive to our constitutional duty, our constitutional obligation to ensure that delimitation is ongoing, and we are building on the work that our predecessors had begun. So we have a boundary review operational plan, and we will proceed with that. But also there's an issue with the kind of data. As you know, for us to do a successful delimitation, we need to have the population and housing census data. And it is on the basis of that that we arrive at what you call the population quota per constituency and per ward. That report was challenged in court, and the court has put that on hold. So we cannot proceed in the absence of the real data that we will require for us to proceed. And for us even to publish that, what you call the preliminary report or the notice of intention to delimit the boundaries, we need that information. So until the courts determine that, then our hands are a little bit tied. But we have told the nation this morning that we will proceed with those activities and processes that are not the subject of litigation. And we hope, and in time, that maybe after the general election, we can move with speed to conclude the comprehensive review of our boundaries. I think in the interest of time, I'll stop there, and I will allow the facilitators to assist us with the next phase. In case there are any questions, my team is here.